Hello friends, welcome to the today's topic, that is Crisc, certified in the Risk and Information System Control, Part 7, Domain 2 of IT Risk Assessment. In this lecture, we'll cover about the following topics. That the first will be the risk register with its template. Second, we'll discuss about the risk analysis methodologies, that is difference between quantitative and qualitative and semi-quantitative analysis. Third on the chart will be the assessment scale, that is level of the risk. And fourth is the business impact analysis. Right? Friends, without wasting time, let's start about the today's first topic, that is about the risk register. Friends, for better assimilation and ease of understanding, we have divided the topics into the following parts. Like first we'll discuss about the risk register purpose. What is the purpose of risk register? Right? Second, we'll discuss about the components. Third, we'll have a overview on comprehensive risk coverage, what all it covers, what is the benefit for the management. Fifth, we'll have a coordination and reporting. Sixth, we'll discuss about the importance of keeping it updated. And at last, the example of the risk register template. Right? Friends, let's start with the today's first, that is purpose. Friends, the risk register serves as a centralized repository, right, for collecting and organizing information about the various risks that an enterprise might face, right? Its main purpose is to facilitate the tracking and management of the risk, right? Similarly, component. Friends, entries in the risk register contain the several key pieces of information. First, that is severity. What is severity? The severity is the degree of seriousness or potential harm associated with a specific risk. Second is the source. What is source? Source is the origin or a cause of the risk, right? Third in the chart is the potential impact. Friends, potential impact or the potential consequences or effect if the risk were to materialize. After this, it is the risk owner, that is the individual or entity responsible for managing and addressing the risk. Fifth will be the current status and disposition. Friends, it is the present state of the risk and its current management strategy. Right? After this, we'll have a difference about the comprehensive risk coverage. Right? In the comprehensive risk coverage, friends, the risk register captures the risk identified through various means within the enterprise. This include risk identified during audit, vulnerability assessment, penetration test, incident report process review, management input, risk scenario creation, and security assessment. Right? After this, the next topic was benefit for management. What is the benefit for the management for the risk register? Friends, the risk register provides a single point of reference, right, for a senior management and department managers. It allows them to access a comprehensive overview of the enterprise risk landscaping, including ongoing risk mitigation efforts, unresolved risk issues, and newly identified risk. Right? After this, let's just move on. In the risk register again, the next thing is the coordination and reporting. Right? Friends, the risk register enable better coordination of the risk response activity across the organization. It also facilitates accurate reporting on the status of the risk management process. Right? And at last, we'll discuss about the importance of keeping it updated. Right? Friends, the effectiveness and value of the risk register depend on its accuracy and relevance. Risk practitioner should periodically review and update the content of the register. This involves adding new risk that emerges and re-evaluating existing risk to ensure they remain pertinent to the enterprise. Friends, in this, after all, we can say that what information you need to include getting started can be difficult. That's why we put together an example to help you to get started on your risk management plan. In simpler terms, a risk register is like a master list, right, that collect all potential risk a company might face along with their seriousness, where they come from, and how they could impact the businesses. Right? So friends, this helps the company leader keep the track of this risk or manage them effectively and make informed decisions about how to deal with them, right? An example might be a technology company. Just take an example of a technology company using a risk register to track potential cybersecurity threat. They would list different type of threats such as data breaching or hacking attempts, along with the how serious each threat is, where it come from, that is external hacker or internal mistakes, and what the company is doing to prevent or address these threats. So this gives the company a clear picture of its vulnerability and help them to allocate resources to protect their system, right? So friends, in a nutshell, we can say that the purpose of the risk register is to consolidate the risk data into one place and enable the tracking of the risk, right? Entries in the risk register show the severity, source, and potential impact of a risk and identify the risk owner and the current status and disposition of the risk, right? Friends, the risk register is the one document that contain all risk that has been detected by various parts and activities, right, of the enterprise, including risk identified in audits, vulnerability assessment, penetration test, or incident report, or process review, or management input, so that risk scenario creation and security assessment. So friends, this allows the management to refer to one place to gain insight into the outstanding risk issues, status of the risk mitigation effort, and the emergence of the newly identified documented risk, right? So in some implementation, the risk register may be accompanied by a control register which include information on testing and monitoring, right? So friends, enterprise management risk register in order to consolidate and track relevant information about the risk into one central repository. So the friends, the risk register allow the senior management and the managers of each department to process the status of the risk management process from a single source, which in turn make it possible to better manage and report on the risk and coordinate risk response, right? At any given time, the risk register should document the entire risk universe of the enterprise, right? So friends, let's understand that what to include in the risk register, right? What all things we can include in the risk register, right? So friends, a risk register, till now we have understood that the risk register is made of a list of the risk and tracking field, right? Your team risk log will most likely look different than others as you will have unique risk associated with your projects. No matter the differences, most risk registers are made up of few essential parts, including risk identification, risk likelihood, and risk mitigation. So friends, these parts work to create a fluid log of information on the potential risk, right? We'll see what all to be included in the risk register. So friends, these logs are also helpful to look back on when working on new projects and that could face the similar risk, right? So a great rule of thumb we can keep in mind is the more complicated the project is, the more intricate your risk register is likely to be. That means it's a good idea to be as specific as possible within your log for large projects that span multiple months and have a number of different stakeholders, right? So here are a few important things what we'll discuss one by one, right? First, to be included in the risk register is risk identification, right? So one of the first entry included in the risk register is the identification of the risk. This is usually in the form of a risk name or identification number. Friends, a risk identification field should include the risk name, identification date, or a subtitle if needed, right? Friends, you don't need to get a super creative when naming your risk, right? A simple summary will also do. On the other hand, if you want to get creative, you can craft persona for each type of risk. For example, using a persona Danilia as your data security risk name to help team members understand how to quickly identify the risk. Along with your name, you may also choose to include a short subtitle and the date of the risk identification. This will help track how long mitigation methods are taking and allow you to identify which risks are taking the longest to resolve, right? Next is the risk description, right? Friends, after the identification is complete, a short description should be added to your log, right? A risk description should include a short or high level overview of the risk, right? And next, why the risk is a potential issue. Understood? How long you choose to make your description is up to how detailed you want your log to be, but the average length is typically 80 to 100 characters. More importantly than the length, a description should include the key points of the risk and why it is a potential issue. Right? Friends, the main takeaway is that a description should accurately describe the risk without getting in the weeds so it can be easily identified. Right? Third in the chart is the risk category. Right? Let's understand it. Friends, there are a number of the risk categories that help quickly identify the potential risk. Right? Quickly identifying the risk makes it easier to assign to the correct team, especially when working on a complicated project with multiple risks, right? A risk category could be any of the following, right? Operation, budget, schedule, technology, information, security, or quality, or else let's say project plan. So to determine the category type, you will first need to evaluate where the risk is coming from and who can help resolve it. You may need to work with the department head if the solution is not obvious. Right? Fourth is the risk likelihood. Right? How likely it is the risk will happen. Friends, if the risks are caught early enough, it's possible the team will be able to sort them out before any real action is needed. So it is possible that the risks that are flagged on your risk register won't actually become a problem, right? The likelihood of a risk can be documented with a simple selection of not likely, likely, or very likely. So categorizing your risk by likelihood can identify which risk to tackle first and which you should wait on, right? Next is the risk analysis, that is the potential impact of the risk, right? So the risk analysis gauges the potential impact of the risk could have on your projects. This helps to quickly identify the most important risk to tackle. This is not to be confused with priority, right? Which takes into account both likelihood and analysis, right? So while team document the risk level differently, one can start with some simple scale, right? Like very low, low, medium, high, and very high. That will study in the upcoming slides. So friends, if you are struggling to identify the risk level, you may want to get a second opinion by working with a department head. This way you can accurately gauge how high the impact might be, right? Next is the risk mitigation, right? Friends, a mitigation plan, also called a risk response plan, is one of the most important part of the risk register, right? After all, the point of the risk management plan is to identify and mitigate possible risks. Basically, it's an action plan. A risk mitigation plan should include a step-by-step solution on how to lessen the risk, and second, the brief description of the intended outcome, and third, how the plan will affect the impact. So friends, while small risk assessment may be easy to mitigate, some risks are much more complex and don't have obvious solution. So in this case, the mitigation plan will need a bit of teamwork to solve. This usually happens beyond the actual risk register document, such as during a meeting or a team huddle, right? However, you choose to conduct your mitigation plan, you should document a high level description within a log for reference and clear communication. So this will not only ensure everyone on the project team understand the response plan, but will also help you visualize the solution, right? Next is the risk priority, that is level of the risk compared to others. Friends, while the impact of the risk will help to determine the priority, it is good to also include the entry on your log. So priority should take into account both the likelihood of the risk and the risk analysis, right? Both of these aspects will make it clear which risks are likely to have harmful consequences on the project. Priority can be documented by a simple number scale, that is low, medium and high. So friends, if you are looking to make your risk register more visually appealing, you may want to document priority by using a color-coded scale instead. This can be used in the place of or alongside the three options, right? Love organizing by color, then color coding your log is a perfect option for you, right? Next is the risk ownership, that is a person responsible for overseeing the solution, right? Friends, once the risk has been identified, reviewed and prioritized, it's time to assign the mitigation deliverables to the implemented, right? So friends, risk ownership should include first that the person assigned to oversee the implementation of deliverables, and next is any additional team member if applicable. So friends, the risk ownership field can help quickly determine which department the risk should be handled by. It can also help visualize which team member have ownership of specific risks. After this, at last, we can include the risk status, that is progress of the risk mitigation plan. Friends, it is the last field to include in your risk register is the status of the risk, right? This helps to communicate whether a risk has been successfully mitigated or not. Friends, a risk status field should be filled out with one of the following, that is open, in progress or closed. So if you want to get more granular with your status option, you may choose a more specific list such as active, not started, or we can say hold, ongoing and complete, right? So some other additional fields also we can include, such as, let's say that while there are handful amount of main entries that every risk register should include, there are additional options items we can include, such as we can say the risk trigger. Friends, adding a risk trigger entry can help you to evaluate why the risk happened in order to prevent the future risk. Similarly, response time we can include, right? While many risks will be on the negative end of the spectrum, there is a possibility for a positive outcome. In this case, you can add a field for a positive or a negative response. And third is the timeline. Friends, you can also include the schedule or timeline of the mitigation plan within the log in order to keep information in one place, right? Here is just some example of a risk template. Friends, you can pause the video and look into each and every topic since we have discussed most of them, right? Frequency of scenario, comments on the frequency, impact scenario of businesses, productivity, impact rating, cost of response, competitive advantage, legal aspect, right? At last, that is part 4, the risk response, that is risk response of the risk through accept, transfer, mitigate or avoid, detailed description of the response, not in case of accept, that is response action, completed, and action plan, right? And at last is the risk indicator, that is the key risk indicator of the risk, right? Let's move on to risk analysis methodology, right? Friends, let's understand the definition first. Risk analysis is a complex and important process that is often needed to provide the data necessary for effective risk response. Risk may be analyzed on either a quantitative or qualitative basis, or in a way that reflects some combination of the two, that is semi-quantitative or hybrid model. Friends, the first sentence of the paragraph states that a risk analysis is a complex and important process, right? This is because risk analysis involves identifying, assessing, and prioritizing risk in order to develop effective risk response, right? Similarly, the second sentence states that the risk may be analyzed on either quantitative or qualitative basis, right? Friends, quantitative risk analysis uses numerical data to assess the likelihood and impact of the risk. So qualitative risk analysis uses subjective judgment to assess the likelihood and impact of the risk, right? Similarly, the third sentence states that the risk may be analyzed using a semi-quantitative or hybrid model. So this type of model combines a quantitative and qualitative method to assess the risk. So the overall message of the paragraph is that the risk analysis is a complex and important process that can be used to assess risk in a variety of ways, right? The specific method used will depend on the nature of the risk and need of the organization, right? Let's understand it more clearly, right? First, the word we have encountered is a quantitative risk analysis. Friends, quantitative risk analysis uses the numerical data to assess the likelihood and impact of the risk. This data can be collected from historical data, expert judgment, or simulation model. So friends, quantitative risk analysis can be used to calculate the expected value of the risk, which is the average loss that is expected to occur if the risk materializes. Similarly, the second word we have encountered in this paragraph is a qualitative risk analysis. Friends, these all terms we will discuss in detail also, but let's have an overview. So friends, the qualitative risk analysis uses the subjective judgment to assess the likelihood and impact of the risk. So this judgment can be based on the experience and expertise of the risk analyst, or it can be based on a structured approach such as Delphi method, what we have discussed in the earlier slides. So friends, qualitative risk analysis is often used when the risk is not enough data available to perform the quantitative risk analysis. And third term we have encountered in this is semi-quantitative or hybrid risk analysis. Friends, semi-quantitative and hybrid risk analysis combine the quantitative and qualitative method to assess the risk. So this type of analysis can be used to get the best of both worlds by using the rigor of quantitative and the flexibility of qualitative analysis. So the best way to choose the right type of risk analysis for a particular situation will depend on the nature of the risk and the availability of data and the need of the organization, right? Let's move to the next, that is understand it better, that quantitative risk analysis, right? Friends, quantitative risk assessment and that is assessment involve the numerical calculation, right, and mathematical model to simulate potential outcome of various scenarios, right? It often represents these outcomes in monetary value, allowing for a more precise understanding of risk and their potential impact, right? First, Let's understand it. It states the first point is the leverage scenario, which tend to leverage numerical calculation and use common mathematical model to simulate the potential outcome. Right? It is often represented in monetary value and used in the cost benefit analysis. Friends, quantitative risk assessment is well suited for a cost benefit analysis, right? Risk that can be quantified in the monetary terms and can be directly compared to a cost associated with various risk responses, aiding decision making, right? It is easily and directly be compared to the cost of various risk responses, right? Challenges of calculating likelihood require the risk practitioner become familiar with the variable considered. Friends, challenges of calculating likelihood, right? Friends, the calculation of likelihood of certain event can be challenging in quantitative risk assessment, right? So the risk practitioner need to understand the variables that should be considered and often rely on calibrated estimates and empirical or historical data to model and calculate the likelihood. Understand? So let's the next point, the risk practitioner may seek to approximate probability using calibrated estimates and quality empirical historical data to model and simulate and calculate a likelihood over an entire population. Right? In this, the word approximate probability using calibrated estimates. Right? Friends, in cases where precise probability data is lacking, a risk practitioner may use calibrated estimates, right, along with the available data to model and calculate likelihood. For instance, using mean time between failures for a large number of identical appliances to estimate when failure might occur. Right? Next point, method become progressively more useful as likelihood approaches certainty. Right? Friends, in this the word that usefulness as a likelihood approaches certainty. In this, the quantitative risk assessment become more useful when likelihood approaches certainty. Right? In scenarios like weather events prevalent in certain regions, where the event itself is assumed to occur, the focus shifts to quantifying the impact and the consequences. Right? So value of the risk, and at last the value of the risk used in the quantitative risk assessment is often calculated on an annual basis to align with the budget cycle, right? And at last compare event using a common denominator. Friends, in this the annual basis and the budget alignment, in this the risk value used in the quantitative risk assessment are often calculated on an annual basis to align with the budgeting cycle. This allows the organization to plan for potential risk and allocate resources accordingly. And at last, that is comparing events. In this quantitative risk assessment, enable the risk practitioner to compare events that occur at different frequencies using a common denominator. This facilitates a meaningful comparison of risk regardless of their occurrence rates. For example, let's consider a utility company, right? In this, we'll discuss each and everything by example. The first is the quantitative approach. Friends, a company uses quantitative risk assessment to assess the risk of power outages due to extreme weather event. They gather historical data on the frequency of such events, the associated cost of the power restoration, and potential revenue losses. Similarly, the cost benefit analysis. Friends, with this data, the company calculates the monetary impact of outages and compare it to the cost of implementing more resilient infrastructure or backup power solution. Third is the likelihood calculation, right? In the utility company, we can understand that to estimate the likelihood, they use both historical event data and calibrated estimates. So they factor in the variables like historical storm pattern or infrastructure vulnerability and predicated weather changes. At last, annual budget alignment. In this, a utility company calculate the annual risk value for the various risk scenario. This helps them to allocate budget resources effectively to address the potential risk. Right? And at last, the comparing the events. Friends, in quantitative risk assessment, the company compares the risk and the potential financial impact of the various weather events that have different occurrence rates. This allows them to prioritize the mitigation strategies, right? So in this example, the quantitative risk assessment enables the utility company to make informed decision about the risk mitigation and allocate resources to address the potential power outage scenario. Moving on to the next, let's discuss about the next, that is qualitative risk analysis, right? That is qualitative risk assessment. Friends, for better understanding, and we'll also divide the qualitative risk assessment into following heads, right? The first will be overview. Second, difficulty of quantitative assessment. Third, benefits of qualitative assessment. Fourth is the scenario of qualitative risk assessment, right? So in overview, we can say that the qualitative risk assessment involve assigning values to the risk on a comparative basis, such as using labels like high, medium and low, or using an ordinary scale like 1 to 10. Understood? So this approach relies on expertise and experience, resulting in subjective evaluation, right? For an example, we can say that a company is evaluating the risk of a data breach. Instead of assigning a specific dollar value to the potential loss, they classify the risk as high due to the sensitivity of the data involved and the potential reputational damage. Right? Second, the difficulty of quantitative assessment. Friends, in some cases, calculating risk in purely numerical terms is challenging, especially considering factors like the organization maturity and the risk practitioner experience. So conducting a quantitative assessment might be difficult in this case. Let's understand it with an example. Let's take a company, a startup company with a limited historical data when it finds hard to predict exact financial loss from a supply chain disruption. So they opt for a qualitative assessment to prioritize potential disruption based on their perceived impact. Right? The third is the benefit of qualitative assessment. Friends, in this, the qualitative assessment provide relative value that help prioritize the response action according to perceived importance, right? So when these perceptions are based on a wide range of stakeholders, the resulting actions are likely to be acceptable to all involved parties. Let's take an example. Let's take a project manager, right? A project manager is using a qualitative assessment to determine which project risk need immediate attention. They involve team members, clients and stakeholders to collectively decide which risks are most concerning to the project success. Right? Last is the scenario of qualitative risk assessment. Friends, qualitative risk assessment are often scenario based and involve description of potential situations, right? So these scenarios involve feedback from multiple stakeholders to reach a consensus about the level of the risk. Let's take an example of an airline company. Friends, an airline company assesses the risk of a flight cancellation due to weather condition. So for this purpose, they gather inputs from the pilot, ground staff, meteorologist and the management to determine the severity of potential disruption. Right? Next, we can discuss the qualitative risk assessment in threat-based, vulnerability-based, and assess impact approaches. Friends, qualitative assessment can be based on the threat, vulnerability, or asset/impact factor. Threat-based scenario focus on potential attack methods, and vulnerability-based scenario consider existing weakness, and asset/impact scenario focus on critical assets and potential damage. Let's understand this thing with an example. Friends, a cybersecurity team uses a threat-based approach to assess the risk of a cyber attack. So they analyze potential attack vectors that hackers might use to compromise the company's system. Last is the result penetration, right? Friends, the outcome of the qualitative risk assessment are often presented in tables that compare the likelihood and impact of the risk event, generating a relative risk level, right? Just take an example of a construction project. The construction project risk assessment table shows that a delay in obtaining permit has a high likelihood and high impact, leading the team to prioritize resolving these issues promptly. So to summarize it, we can say that the qualitative risk assessment involves assigning relative value to the risk based on experience and expertise, and it is particularly useful when precise numerical calculations are challenging. So this approach helped us to prioritize response actions and involve stakeholders to ensure collective agreement on the risk level and mitigation strategies. Right? So in a nutshell, we can say that it is based on the scenario or description of situation that either have occurred or may occur. Next, its intention is to elicit feedback from multiple stakeholders and eliminate unlikely assumptions and determine a level of the risk that reflect a reasonable consensus across the enterprise. Right? It assigns value on the comparative or ordinal basis, such as high, medium, low on a scale of 1 to 10. It relies heavily on experience and expert knowledge, resulting in a subjective finding. Right? Relative value can typically be used to order response action in terms of perceived importance, may be based on threat, vulnerabilities, or asset or impact, or some combination of these factors. Its results typically presented in the form of table that compares the likelihood of the risk event with its impact to the enterprise. Right? Let's move further ahead. Let's discuss about the semi-quantitative and hybrid risk assessment. Friends, semi-quantitative risk assessment bring together the qualitative and quantitative method. Right? So it combines the qualitative and quantitative approach. For instance, let's say a company is assessing the risk of a potential data breach, right? So qualitative assessment might involve identifying vulnerabilities in their IT infrastructure and categorizing them based on the severity, that is low, medium, or high. So quantitative assessment could involve assigning monetary value to the potential losses due to the data breaches, example financial loss or reputational damage. Coming to the next is the realistic input from qualitative assessment. Friends, a hybrid approach incorporates the realistic insight of a qualitative assessment. In an example, the qualitative assessment could involve considering factors like the company's security protocols, employee training, and legal compliance when evaluating the risk of a data breach. Next, numerical scale from quantitative assessment. Friends, a numerical scale used in the quantitative risk assessment is also integrated into semi-quantitative approach. Right? For a data breach example, this might involve assigning a numerical value to the potential financial impact of a breach, such as $1 lakh. Next, providing a wide range for precise assessment. Friends, the objective is to create a scale with a broad enough range to allow for a more precise risk assessment. For instance, a scale could range from 0 to 100. So this enables the finer differentiation between the different level of the risk severity. Right? A risk score of 85 might indicate a high level of the risk compared to a score of 40. Right? Moving further ahead. Next point is the comparison with the qualitative ranges. Friends, this highlights that the using numerical value like example 0 to 100 make it easier to prioritize a larger number of risk factor compared to a limited level in a typical qualitative approach. Example low, medium, high. This means that an organization can assess and prioritize a more diverse range of risk. Next, objective source of value. Friends, however, a caution that the risk practitioner should ensure that those interpreting the numerical value understand that they don't necessarily come from purely objective sources. For instance, assigning a monetary value to reputational damage involves subjective judgment and estimation, which should be acknowledged by the risk assessment team. So in summary, we can say that the semi-quantitative risk assessment combines qualitative and quantitative method to create a more comprehensive and a precise understanding of risk. Its benefit from a realism of qualitative assessment and the numerical scale of quantitative assessment, providing a broader and a more nuanced perspective on risk factor and their prioritization. Nonetheless, the subjective nature of some value used should be recognized to prevent misconception about their objectivity. Right? So we can say in a nutshell that it combines the value of qualitative and quantitative risk assessment. It has the realistic input of a qualitative assessment combined with a numerical scale used to determine that the impact of a quantitative risk assessment. Its goal is to provide a scale with a wide enough range that risk can be assessed in a more precise manner, that is from 0 to 100, as we have already discussed. It is easier to prioritize the multiple risk compared to the smaller qualitative ranges of 3 to 5 levels. However, risk practitioner should ensure risk owner do not mistake the origin of these values as coming from purely objective sources. Right? So friends, moving the next we'll discuss about the assessment scale, that is level of the risk. We'll discuss about the qualitative values, semi-quantitative values and their description. Right? So let's understand the first, that is very high. We can categorize in 96 to 100. Value is 10 and its description is multiple severe or catastrophic adverse effect on organization operations, organization assets or individuals, other organizations or the nation. So friends, let's understand it. In very high risk, when a risk is classified as very high, it indicates that a particular threat event, right, has the potential to cause significant and severe negative consequences across the various aspects. So these consequences can affect not only the organization experiencing the risk but also its assets, individual associated with the organization, other external organization or even the entire nation. Understood? So let's understand it. Just take an example of a cybersecurity breach. Right? Suppose a major e-commerce company experiences a data breach due to cyber attack. So this breach could lead to severe consequences such as financial losses to the company. Second, compromise personal and financial information of customers. Third, damage to the company's reputation and customer trust. Fourth, potential legal action from the customers affected by the breach. And at last, we can say that wider economic implication due to decreased consumer confidence in online transactions. right? Second example, we can understand it by a natural disaster impact on critical infrastructure, right? Imagine a region prone through an earthquake, right, where a major earthquake strikes near the nuclear power plant. So this event could result in certain things like, first, severe damage to the power plant, leading to a potential nuclear disaster. Second, widespread power outages affecting hospitals, communication network, and essential services. Third, evacuation and displacement of nearby residents. Fourth, environmental contamination with long-term health and ecological consequences. And fourth, economic and infrastructure damage impacting the entire regional stability. Understood? So in each of these examples, the classification of very high risk indicates that a potential consequences of the threat event extend beyond the immediate organization affected. So the adverse effect can be severe or even catastrophic, impacting various levels from individual well-being to a national stability. Right? So in summary, the concept of a very high risk signify that a threat event has the potential to trigger multiple severe or catastrophic adverse effects across the different sectors, organizations, individual, and even a nation. So this classification helps decision makers allocate the resource. Now coming on to high risk, friends, the high risk in this context of the threat event and their potential impact on the various entities, right? It may lead to severe or catastrophic adverse effect. Let's understand it, right? So friends, high risk refer to a situation where there is a significant possibility, right, uh, of a negative event happening. In this case, it is a threat event, which could be any event or incident that poses a danger or harm, right? So since the description states that severe or catastrophic event, it is a threat event, right, that occurs, it has a potential to cause a negative impact that ranges from severe to catastrophic. This means that the consequences could be extremely serious and damaging, right? Such as organizational operation, such as this include the functioning and activities of an organization. If a high risk threat event occurs, it could disrupt or harm the way the organization operates, right? Just take an example of a cybersecurity breach, right? A high risk cybersecurity breach in a bank system could lead to severe financial loss for the bank, compromise sensitive customer data, or cause reputational damage and potentially affect customer financial security, right? Similarly, natural disaster. If a manufacturing plant is located in a high risk earthquake zone, a severe earthquake could not only damage the plant and its equipment but also disrupt the production, affect the livelihood of employees, and disrupt the supply chain for other businesses that rely on the plant's output, right? Coming to the next, that is moderate risk. Friends, the moderate risk is in this context of a threat event and their potential impact on various entities. It may lead to the serious adverse effect. Understood? So the moderate risk refer to a situation where there is a notable but not extremely high possibility of a negative event occurring. So in this case, it is a threat event, which is something that would potentially cause harm or damage, right? Similarly, in this case, the serious adverse effect, that if a threat event take place, it has the potential to cause a negative impact that is significant but falls short of the being catastrophic. The consequences could be substantial, but they might not reach the level of complete disaster, right? Example, data breach, right? A moderate risk data breach in retail company database could lead to significant financial loss, right? Compromise computer privacy, disrupt business operation as system are investigated and restored, and potentially prompt regulatory scrutiny impacting the industry on a broader scale. right? In each of these examples, the moderate risk threat event has the potential to cause serious adverse effect on various levels, from individual to national, even though the consequences might not be as extreme as in high risk or catastrophic scenario. Understood? Moving to the next, that is low. Low is a semi-quantitative value, that is 2, a limited adverse effect. Friends, low risk refer to a situation where there is a relatively low likelihood of negative event occurring. In this case, it is a threat event which is something that could potentially cause harm or damage. Understood? Description: a limited adverse effect. Friends, if a threat event does happen, it has the potential to cause a negative impact, right? That is minimal in scope. The consequences could be noticeable but not severe, and they would likely not cause significant disruption, right? Example: temporary network glitch, right? A low risk network glitch in an online service could cause brief disruption in a service, potentially inconvenience users, result in the minimal data loss, and have limited ripple effect on related businesses or the local economy, right? Friends, a low risk threat event has the potential to cause limited adverse effect on various levels. While the impact might be noticeable, they are not expected to be severe or to have significant consequences for the organization or individual or other organizations or nations. Moving to the next, that is very low. Friends, it is a negligible adverse effect. Very low risk. Explain the concept of very low risk in the context of threat event and their potential impact on various entities, right? So this refers to a situation where the likelihood of negative event occurring extremely low. So in this case, it is a threat event which is something that could potentially cause harm or damage, right? So the description is negligible adverse effect. Friends, if a threat event were to occur, it has the potential to cause an impact that is so minor that it is most negligible. The consequences could be minimal and likely not noticeable in any significant way, right? Just take an example of organization operation. This includes the activity and functioning of an organization. If a very low risk threat event happen, it might lead to almost no disruption or changes in how the organization operates, right? Coming to the nation, that is the impact, if any, would likely to be so insignificant that it would not have any notable implication on the nation or the country where the organization operates. Just by example, minor office supply issue. Friends, a very low risk event could be something as simple as running out of stapler in an office. This might lead to the slight inconvenience and a small delay in a paperwork, but the impact could be negligible on both individuals and other organization, right? Friends, a very low risk threat event has the potential to cause negligible adverse effect on various levels. The impact are so minor that they are hardly noticeable and would not lead to any meaningful disruption or concern, right? Moving further ahead, let's discuss about the risk analysis methodology. Friends, as per the CRM, the semi-quantitative hybrid risk assessment, friends, the semi-quantitative risk assessment can be an effective compromise when impact is quantifiable but likelihood is not. Under such circumstances, applying a basic range of high, medium and low may not offer sufficient precision to generate useful risk rating, whereas a more granular range of likelihood value may be used with quantified impact to support specific recommendation for risk response. Let's understand, friends, semi-quantitative risk assessment and its application when assessing the risk based on the quantifiable impact and unquantifiable likelihood, right? Friends, the first word, that is semi-quantitative risk assessment. Friends, this refers to an approach used to evaluate the risk that combine element of both quantitative and qualitative, that is numerical or descriptive analysis. It is a middle ground between fully quantitative and purely qualitative method. Right? The next word which has been highlighted, that is impact is quantifiable but likelihood is not. Let's understand it. Friends, in some situation, it is possible to measure or quantify the potential impact of a risk event, such as in terms of financial loss or damage. However, the likelihood or probability of that event occurring might not be easily quantifiable due to various factors that make it uncertain. Understood? Similarly, basic range of medium and low. Friends, it states that a traditional risk assessment often use a basic categorization of risk into high, medium and low based on their perceived impact and likelihood. However, in cases where likelihood cannot be precisely measured, this approach might not provide enough accuracy. Right? May not offer sufficient precision to generate useful risk rating, whereas a more granular range of likelihood. Friends, this phrase instead states that instead of using only three categories like high, medium and low for likelihood, a more detailed and a specific range of likelihood value can be employed. This allows for a finer distinction of the potential probability of the risk event occurring, right? May be used with a quantified impact. What is quantified impact? When the impact of a risk event can be measured in quantifiable terms such as monetary loss or operational disruption, it provides a solid basis for analysis. To support specific recommendation for risk response. Friends, by combining the quantified impact with more detailed likelihood assessment, the semi-quantitative approach can provide a more nuanced understanding of the risk. This in turn supports the development of a specific recommendation for how to respond to the identified risk. Right? Let's understand it with the help of an example. Friends, imagine a construction project where the potential cost overrun due to weather related delays can be quantified in terms of dollars. However, accurately predicting the likelihood of these delays is challenging due to the unpredictability of weather pattern. So in this scenario, the first, that is quantified impact, will be the financial impact of delay and the estimated based on the historical data and industry standard. Similarly, unquantifiable likelihood is whether disruption might not be easily quantifiable due to the inherent variability of weather event, right? So using a semi-quantitative approach, granular likelihood value, that is instead of labeling likelihood as high, medium or low, a more detailed scale could involve likelihood value from 1 to 10 reflecting the range of possible weather scenario, right? So in this example, the semi-quantitative approach allows for a more informed decision-making process by acknowledging the difficulty in quantifying likelihood, where leveraging the quantified impact to develop tailored risk response strategies. Right? Moving further ahead, let's discuss about the business impact analysis. Friends, each business continuity requirement and determine the organizational resilience. It is a process to determine the impact of losing the support of any resource, identifying the initial impact and provide the reliable data to enable decision making. Friends, business impact analysis, this is a structured process used by the organization to determine the potential consequences of disruption to their business operations. So the main purpose is to understand the impact of losing resources and to establish the requirement for maintaining continuity. Right? Continuity requirement and the resource loss impact. In this, the business impact analysis help to identify what resources are essential for business operation and how losing those resources would impact the organization. It's about understanding what needed to keep the business running smoothly, right? It involves determining the impact of losing the support of any resources, establish the escalation of loss over time. Friends, in addition to immediate impact, a comprehensive business impact analysis also looks at how the effect of the resource losses might escalate over time if the disruption is not quickly addressed. This can help to prioritize the response effort, right? Next, identify the minimum resource needed to recover. Friends, providing the reliable data for decision making, the goal of business impact analysis is to provide the accurate and detailed information that senior management can use to make informed decision about how to manage and mitigate the risk to the organization operations, right? What is the importance? The goal of business impact analysis is to provide reliable data on the basis of which senior management can make appropriate decision, right? Business impact analysis help the organization to prioritize their critical business services based on their potential impact. This ensures that the resources are allocated effectively to maintain our most important function during the disruption, right? Friends, just let's understand with an example, right? Imagine a financial institution, right? A business impact analysis conducted within the organization might reveal that the IT infrastructure and customer service personnel are critical for the business operation. So if these resources were lost due to a cyber attack, the immediate impact might be a service disruption and potential financial losses. However, over time, this impact could escalate to customer dissatisfaction, reputational damage, and regulatory penalties. Based on the business impact analysis finding, the organization can prioritize resources to bolster cybersecurity measures and create response plan that ensure a swift recovery of IT system and customer service capabilities. So this in turn enables the institution to minimize the overall impact of such an event and make informed decision about resource allocation of business continuity planning. Right? Moving further ahead, let's discuss about the enablings. Enablings states, first, prioritize the business defined critical service. Friends, compelling a business impact analysis help the organization to identify and prioritize the clear critical services. These are the services that are essential for achieving strategic priorities, goal, and objectives. So by understanding what services are most important, an organization can focus its resources and effort on maintaining their continuity. Next, determine how business critical services could be protected. Friends, a business impact analysis enable organization to determine how these critical services should be protected. This involves understanding the potential risk and vulnerabilities that could disrupt these services and devising strategies to mitigate or respond to those risks effectively. Right? Moving to the next, that is defining the acceptable level of diminishing operation before impacting strategic priorities. Friends, though a business impact analysis, organizations can establish acceptable level of diminished operation that they can sustain before it start affecting their strategic priorities. So this threshold help guide decision making during disruption, indicating when to initiate response and recovery effort. Right? And last point, enable organization to achieve its goal and objective. Friends, the outcome of a business impact analysis ensure that an organization continuity planning is aligned with its broader strategic goal and objectives. So by focusing on critical services and their protection an organization's resilience effort are directly tied to its overall mission and success. Let's understand with an example. Let us consider a retail chain as an example. Friends, first prioritizing the critical services. As through the business impact analysis, a retail chain determines that its online sale platform and inventory management system are critical services. So these services directly support its strategic priority of expanding its online presence and boosting sales. Moving to the next, discussing about the protection strategies. Friends, a business impact analysis identify the potential risk such as cyber attack and supply chain disruption that could affect the critical services. So the organization then develop the strategies to protect these services like implementing robust cybersecurity measures and diversifying suppliers. Similarly, defining the acceptable level in diminished operation. Friends, in the similar case, a business impact analysis helps the retail chain understand that it can tolerate 12-hour interruption in its online sales platform before it starts significantly impacting its strategic priority. So this threshold guide responses effort and ensure that the organization focus is on swift recovery within that window. And at last point, what we have discussed regarding the alignment of the goals and objective. Friends, by prioritizing the protection of its online sales platform and inventory management, the retail chain business impact analysis outcome directly align with the strategy goal of expanding online sales. Right? So this integration ensures that a business continuity effort contribute to achieve its broader objective. So in this example, we can state that a business impact analysis allowed the retail chain to make informed decision about where to allocate resources, how to protect critical services, and how to respond to disruption, all while ensuring that its resilience efforts are in line with the strategic priorities and overall success. Moving to the next, that is defining. Friends, we can state that information provided in the context of business impact analysis outcomes and their transformation into the defining specific aspect of an organization continuity planning. The first, that is activities and resource required to achieve the enterprise strategy. Right? So we can say that the ability gained from completing the business impact analysis, such as prioritizing critical services, can be translated into defining the specific business activities and resources required to achieve the organization's strategic goals. This involves understanding which processes and assets are crucial for strategic success. Right? So, in an example, we can state that the business impact analysis reveals the software development and a customer support and a server infrastructure are crucial for the organization's strategic goal of delivering innovative technology solution in a technology company. Right? The company defines these activities and resources are essential for achieving its strategic objectives. Right? Similarly, next point, what need to be protected and order of recovery following an incident. Friends, the ability to determine how critical services should be protected and the order in which they should be recovered after an incident translated into created a structured plan for safeguarding these services and establishing a clear sequence for their restoration during a disruption. For better understanding, if we take an example, same example of a technology company, we can say that based on the business impact analysis, the company decides that its server infrastructure need protection against the cyber threat. So in the event of an incident, the recovery order is defined. First, server for the core services and then customer support system followed by a software development tools. Right? Moving further ahead, next third point, that is recovery time frame to inform when service needed to be recovered. Friends, the establishment of recovery time frame based on the business impact analysis outcome inform the timing of service recovery effort. It provides a guideline for when service needed to be fully operational again, ensuring that the organization can resume its critical function within their acceptable timelines. For better understanding, let's start discuss again with an example. So in an example, we can say in a technology company, a business impact analysis helped the company to establish recovery timeframes. For example, critical servers should be operational within 6 hours. So this guide the company's response effort, ensuring timely services recovery aligned with strategic goals. Right? Next we point recommendation of reasonable and appropriate risk response. Friends, the business impact analysis conducted by an organization offer valuable insight to risk practitioner. So these insights enable the risk practitioner and the reasonable risk response strategies. These strategies could involve risk mitigation measures, contingency planning, and the risk transfer method based on the identified critical services and potential impact. Right? And at last, guide the senior management to select appropriate treatment and recovery strategies. Friends, in this the business impact analysis also guide the senior management in making the informed decision regarding the risk treatment and recovery strategies. So by understanding the critical services, potential vulnerabilities and recovery priorities, senior management can select the most suitable strategies for maintaining operation during disruption. Friends, since we have started with a technology company, so in technology company we can say like that the business impact analysis finding inform risk practitioner that the software development tools are critical. Right? They recommend the cyber security measures to protect their process. So senior management guided by business impact analysis outcome approve the investment in security solution for software development. Right? So in this example, the business impact analysis outcome shape how the organization defines, protects, and recover its critical services. They also guide the risk practitioner and the senior management, ensuring that the continuity effort are aligned with strategic priorities and objectives. Right? Friends, hope you have understood each and everything. Here we comes to the end of part 7, domain 2, presented by Let's Learn series. Friends, please do subscribe to our channel and thank you for watching. Stay tuned.